Hello, Tim here with Marsgohome, and welcome to part 3 of this VHS deep dive. Let's jump right into it. In the last video, we got this far, with some color correction, tape wobbles, frame edges, and some sweet interlacing lines. And in this tasty video, we'll start simulating some various tape damage effects. Let's begin by adding what I scientifically call static crunchy lines at the bottom of the frame. Now technically, as I mentioned in an earlier video, these lines are in the overscan area and are not broadcast to older CRT televisions. Also, these lines at the bottom of the screen can be from the head switching points on the drum scan of the VCR. Now, if the VCR is set up correctly, these lines should be no more than 6 lines up from the bottom. There are 2 video heads in a VCR, and the lines are from where one head takes over from the other. The better made the machine, the narrower the lines are. We can get mathematical with it, but we don't need to be super precise. This is where we can have some creative liberty. First, we need to make sure none of our layers are selected, and a quick keyboard shortcut to use is the F2 function key. This will deselect any and all layers in the timeline. Now come up to our toolbar and select the pen tool. We want to draw a line from the left side of the frame to the right, straight across. Holding shift while drawing the line will keep it perfectly straight. Set the color to black or a dull black. This is up to you and it's your taste. Now make sure the fill is set to none and a stroke width of 1. Rename the shape layer to bottom line black or something like that. Now create a new solid and name it bottom line matte. Let's put our trusty old fractal noise on this matte layer. Let's change the fractal type to threads and let's go crazy with some of these settings. We're going to set the contrast up to about 250 and the brightness to about -70. Let's twirl down the transform and change the scale to about 40-ish. And I want to animate these threads jumping all over the place. So we're going to do that with a offset turbulence wiggle expression. Hold the Alt while clicking on the stopwatch and let's add a wiggle expression of 1 by, let's do something crazy like 500. This thing will jump all over the place. Rad. Now let's set the track matte of the bottom line to our matte layer and make sure it's set to Luma. Let's twirl open our shape layer of the bottom line black. On the stroke width of our line, we're going to add a simple wiggle expression. Again, a wiggle 30 by 2. This will grow and shrink the width of the line as it plays through, so it's not so uniform. Now let's duplicate the shape layer, and we're going to rename this layer to bottom line white. Push the position down just a little bit. We'll come back and adjust these a little bit more later, and come up to our stroke color and change this to white. Now while we're here, how about recreate that little bottom strip or video errors we see at the bottom of the videotape. Again, this sits in the overscan area of the tape, so you usually don't see it. Let's create a new solid layer, drop it down here, and we're going to name this to video errors matte. And we are going to pre-compose it by holding down Shift Control C. And we're going to leave all attributes in the composition, hit OK. Let's double click and open this up. Let's just rename this layer to black and we're going to add a fill of black onto it. Let's duplicate our black layer, name this to white and change the fill color to white. With our white layer selected, let's take our rectangle mask tool and draw a small sliver down at the bottom. You can eyeball it. White layer still selected. Let's add a roughen edges. Drop the border to 1. Let's take the edge sharpness down to like 0.3. Let's take the scale and bring this to about 30. And we want to stretch the width out so it's not so crunchy. So let's just bring this up. 3.5 seems fine. Now again, let's add our trusty old wiggle expression on the offset turbulence, just so it doesn't stay uniform and still the whole time. We want movement as organic as possible. So let's do wiggle 3 by 20. There we go. So it's not constant. While we're here, let's just add a fast box blur to this. Iterations to 1, and let's just bring a super small, like 0.5 blur. Let's Let's go back to our composite, and what we need to do is we need to take our very bottom YC footage layer that has no effects on it, and we need to duplicate it. Let's bring this right below our color correction. Let's bring our video errors right above that one here, and let's rename this to YC video error. We need to set the track matte for the video error, set it to Luma, and one thing we need to do is this stretchy bottom is going to be messing with this matte here. So we need to make sure our stretchy bottom is below our video errors. With our video error YC selected, let's add a displacement matte. Let's set the map layer to our video errors matte. Set the vertical to 0. Let's make sure our horizontal is set to luminance, and we need to push this over something like that, -20 or so. Now with tape, nothing is ever still. We're constantly getting things dancing around, so that's why we're going to use another wiggle expression on our max horizontal displacement. So this thing kind of just dances back and forth. We're going to do that. Hold down Alt, wiggle. Let's do about 310. So it's just slowly moves around. All right, so one thing we need to do, but I prefer if we take our matte and let's just drop this just a little bit further down. There we go, something like that. Give it a preview. All right. Now, if this white line or this black line is too much, you can either disable it, or you can also change the color of it or drop the opacity of it. Something like that. Now let's create a tape warp. Kind of like that bulge that happens to the tape that goes from the bottom to the top every once in a while. Let's do that by creating a new solid. Let's name this tape warp matte. Just like we did before, let's pre-compose it. Leave all attributes. Double click. We've done this before. Let's add a fill. Change it to black. Duplicate. Name this white. Let's come up to our rectangle mask tool and let's create somewhat a small horizontal mask in the center. Tap F on the keyboard and bring up the feather options. Unlink the values, and on the Y value, push it to about 15. On the same layer, let's draw a new mask kind of at the bottom of this white mask. Change the new mask to subtract. This will cut out a small section of this white mask. Cool. With the layer selected, tap P to bring up the position, and on the Y position, let's drag this layer all the way to the bottom until it's completely off the screen. If you want your dimensions separated like this, just right click on the dimensions and select Separate Dimensions. This is just a little tip and it does nothing except for separating the two. Works the same, nonetheless. Let's set a keyframe. If you hold down Shift and tap the page down key on your keyboard, it can jump 10 frames at a time. I'll tap it 5 times to take the Y value position and drag it all the way to the top until it's completely out of frame. This sets a keyframe automatically. With the playhead still at this keyframe and the layer selected, I'm going to hold down Alt or Command and bracket. This will trim down the layer to where I need it. Let's duplicate this layer and drag it to about 5-second mark. Cool. Let's pop out of this comp and back to our composite comp. Another keyboard shortcut tip I use all the time is I hold down Tab and arrow to the comp I want to go to and just hit Enter. Cool. Create a new adjustment layer and name this Tape Warp Displacement. Let's put our displacement map effect on it, and let's set displacement map to our tape warp map. Put the max horizontal displacement to 0 and the max vertical displacement to, let's say, 3 to start. Let's hide our matte layer, and we need to make sure our adjustment layer is set to an adjustment layer. And if we do a small preview, we can see in this area as it travels up, it starts bulging out the frame just a little bit with a cut through. Where this black line is, it cuts through it and gently falls off. So let's do a quick RAM preview. The reason I use a pre-comp for a matte is just in case my comp runs longer than 10 seconds or 15 seconds, I can just time remap the matte into a loop, which I'll show how to do later in these tutorials. Now, when I referred to my reference footage, I noticed that the frame had some horizontal line texture breaking up the image. I suspect this has to do to the limited pixels or the interlacing fields, but not entirely sure. Could be a terrible camera or an old tape. Now, let's say this particular tape is really old. It's been through the ringer. The heat, the cold, the rain, ran through the VCR a million times. Maybe when it was transferred over digitally, the VCR heads were worn out and all gunked up with tape residue. Either way, it really crapped up the image. So let's add some of that damage. We can duplicate our grain full frame layer and name this layer static texture full frame. Delete the grain effect, add a noise effect on it, bring the amount to 100% and uncheck the use color noise. Let's tap the S on the keyboard and unlink the X and Y value. We want to stretch this layer out on the X value a lot, something like 400%. This will accentuate those horizontal lines. Now, let's drop the opacity to like 2 or 5. It's there, but it's not punching you in the face there. How about we add some static pops or tape crunch throughout the whole thing? We'll start with a new solid layer. Name it Static Pops Random. Let's add a fractal noise to it. And we're going to change this to Turbulent Basic and set the noise type to block. We're going to invert this, and I want to push the contrast up to like 380 to start, and the brightness to, let's -50 for now. In the transform settings, let's uncheck the uniform scaling, and I want to bring the width up all the way to 600 and the height down to, let's just go as low as it can, 20 for now. Now we want to add a wiggle expression to the evolution, so it just goes all over the place and a lot. So we're going to do another wiggle expression, wiggle, and we're going to do 30 by something really big, like 10,000. And you can adjust how strong these static lines are through the brightness. So let's just keep it at -50 for now. Let's come over to our blend mode, and we're going to change this to screen. Do a quick preview. Now we have some crunchy little static pop lines. Make it less or make it more depending on the brightness value. Now let's add what I call a tape smear. A tape smear is just that. It's kind of like our tape warp effect that moves from the bottom to the top. But this one actually looks like it's smearing the tape a little bit. Create a new adjustment layer. Bring this down here. Make sure it's turned to an adjustment layer. And we're going to name this to tape smear. We're going to add a simple wire removal to it. And again, we need to make sure that our point A and point B are set correctly, and we've done this before. So 0% on the A, 640, and let's just start off with let's do 360 on both of them, so it is in a straight line. We're going to set the mirror blend by 50, the slope to 100, and let's bring the thickness to about, let's do 13 for now. And as you can see, it's starting to smear it. Now we need to animate this going from the bottom to the top. So at the very start, let's set keyframes for a point A and point B. Let's tap U on the keyboard, and let's bring down point A towards the bottom. Point B, 460 is also really good. Let's tap the Shift page down key twice, and we're gonna move our point A and point B towards the top, just before it gets to the very top. Make sure these two numbers are the same so it continues to stay a straight line. All right, now what we need to do is we need to set a keyframe for the thickness. At the very start, set a keyframe. We're going to set this to 0. Shift page down once, and let's change this to like 15. Page down once again, and set this back down to 0. And again, with our playhead on the layer selected, hit Alt or Command and bracket. Cuts that down. So now we can continue to use this or put this wherever we want on our comp. Let's do it something like right there. Let's do a quick preview. We can duplicate it, have it as many times as we want go throughout it. In the next video, we'll do some fancy UI stuff. If you found any of this helpful or useful, please consider subscribing to this channel. It'll help a lot. My name is Tim with Marsgohome, and until next time, stay rad, stay cool, stay creative.
Want to skip the line and make Grandma proud? An After Effects template file will be available to purchase for a killer low price. Don't want After Effects? Then try out the Sweet Premiere Pro Mogrt file. Dynamically adjust the color, handcraft your desired degradation, take hold of the pure awesome power and control the camera date, time, and much, much more. Carefully crafted to give you, the creator, all the knobs and doohickeys so you can dial in your own unique look. Get one or get it all. Visit marsgohome.com for more information.
Thanks, Marsgohome.